It's a real pleasure to be able to join you guys this evening to talk about stigma. And for me, it's been a very interesting journey because I didn't really know anything about this subject when I was younger. And it's only through certain things that I'm going to talk about with you this evening that it's become quite prevalent in my life. And I've got a few slides that I'm going to use just to give you guys something to think about while we're wandering through my story. So stigma and me, my early years, my understanding of stigma when I was younger, I didn't really know what the word meant, to be honest. And we never really had anybody who had a disability in my environment. I remember at school, there were no children with disabilities. Diabetes, you really didn't hear about it at all. The only thing that I can ever remember being sort of prevalent in my environment was mental health, really. And that carried a massive stigma around it. And I think it's just because of the word that is used. And I find language fascinating anyway. But just that word mental that's in mental health, it was always tied with mental institutions. So I think that's where we've got a lot of stigma attached to that particular subject as well. I like to call it mind health. I think mind health is just as important as physical health in life. But for me, when I was younger, I had no exposure to difference. So everybody was pretty much the same when I was at school. Everybody was fit and healthy, and there was never really any exposure. And I think in a way, that's what we need to start integrating into our early years education systems, that people are different. And there's a lot of things as well that are hidden that you don't know that someone has. And I think just through knowledge, they always say, you know, knowledge is power. And I really think it is, because it empowers you to be able to ask questions. It empowers you to be kinder to others as well. And also with knowledge, it empowers you to be kinder to yourself. So my journey has been a very interesting one. For me, like I say, I didn't really have anybody to compare difference to when I was younger. And I didn't know I had stigma and that other people really did as well, because I grew up in an environment, I grew up in a public house. So as far as my mum and dad were concerned, everybody's money is the same colour, everybody stands on the same level, no one is above you in society. It was very much everything was an even keel. And we didn't have any discrimination in that environment. My dad wouldn't allow it. So we grew up, I would say, with a very balanced outlook on life and other human beings. It was only when I actually became disabled myself that I suddenly found myself in a world where all of a sudden people were looking at me, because I'd been fully able-bodied until 17 years old, and then following a spinal injury where I became paralysed from the chest down. When I came out of hospital, I was having to use a wheelchair. And I remember going into the town with my sister in a wheelchair, and literally after 20 minutes, I said to her, "You're going to have to take me home." And she said, "Why do you want to go home? We've only just come out." I said, "Because everybody is looking at me, Helen." And she said, "Don't be so silly. No one's looking at you." And then I said to her, when we're going down here now, just pay attention to what people are doing when I'm pushing along. And for me, it was just every face. It felt like, it probably wasn't, but it felt like every face I was going past was just staring at me. And they weren't staring at me with a smile on their face, or they weren't asking me questions. It was like literally a blank stare. And it just felt like everyone was thinking. This is a massive assumption as well. I was assuming what they were thinking, that they were thinking, you know, what's wrong with her? There's something different about her. There's something not normal about her. And I suddenly felt within myself a feeling that I'd never had before in my life, which was that now I'm different, and that there was something wrong with that. It was really interesting. I felt some sort of shame around not being the same as everybody else, or suddenly being different to how I was. And I found it really, really hard to deal with. I honestly did. So I remember my sister saying to me, you know, "Don't be so silly, just smile at people." But I couldn't even find myself being able to smile at people, because it just seemed like it was every single person that was coming past me. And I found it a great challenge. And because I didn't really know anybody else who was in the same boat as me as well, it was very hard to talk to my family and friends about it. It was as if they just couldn't really understand, because they still viewed me as the Wendy prior to the accident. So they really couldn't see or get into what I call my map of reality and feel what I was feeling in those environments, they would just say to me a lot of the time, you know, don't be so silly. There's nothing wrong. It's fine. Just get on. But that really didn't help me on the inside. I started developing a lot of self-confidence issues. I didn't want to go out a lot, especially if I was on my own. So I found myself staying in more and sometimes retracting myself from society because of it. And then I got to a certain point, I think it was sport actually. It was when I became a wheelchair basketball player and ended up in the Great Britain women's team. I was with people who were in a similar boat to me, sort of 4 or 5 days a week. And for me, it allowed me to feel some sense of normality, and it built back some confidence within me as well. I always think sport in any sense is a great confidence giver. And it helped me as well stop explaining to people. I felt like I had to explain my life away to people, why I was like what I was. And it was at that point that I started expanding back into myself in a sense and being able to deal with, you know, the change in body, deal with the way people were viewing me. And with that confidence then came the ability to be able to talk to other people about it as well. So also what I realised was I had stigma around disabilities as well, which I didn't realise. So I moved into a bungalow in the village that I live in now, and behind me were some bungalows that had scope patients in, and they're cerebral palsy, so but extreme versions of cerebral palsy. And I remember one day, and this was quite shocking to me because I did not realise I had any judgment around disability whatsoever until I was stood in my kitchen one day and one of the patients came around in his wheelchair and he pushed onto my driveway, and he couldn't speak, he could just make noise, and he started shouting and waving his arms about at me. And I remember thinking, oh, what do I do? Oh no. And I remember dropping down to the floor on my knees and crawling out of the kitchen, literally thinking, I can't cope with this, I don't know what to do. And my partner at the time said to me, what on earth are you doing? And I said, there's someone on the driveway in a wheelchair just shouting at me. He said, do you not think you should go out there and talk to him? And it was at that point, it sort of snapped me out of it. And I realised, like, wow, you know, I have stigma attached to other disabilities as well. And what do I do about it? And the reason I had it was because I had no knowledge of it. And sometimes when we have no knowledge of something, it scares us in a way. So I remember going outside and talking to the guy. One of his carers came round and explained to me what all his hand movements meant and all of his sounds. And he became a really, really good friend. And that was through just learning about something different, learning about someone different. So overcoming yourself is really an important part if you're going to get your confidence back and remove the stigmas around whatever, I'm going to say, different ability it is, because I don't consider any of them disabilities, they're just different abilities. And I always say the power to change is always within you. Leading by example, showing others how to be in situations and around other people who have these hidden factors that no one sees. I have a friend who's type 1 diabetic, and when he got all of his new kit, he has all the buzzers and the beepers and the bits that inject the insulin. And what I found with him was every time we went out and someone looked at him, he would introduce himself as a type 1 diabetic. He felt like he had to reason why he had all these things on him. And I remember saying to him one day, do you realise that you introduce yourself? You don't say like, hi, my name is. You go, oh, I'm a type 1 diabetic. And it's like, that's not who you are. Do you know what I mean? You're a beautiful human being who has as much value as everybody else. So try to take away that, not dispel it and dismiss it as if you don't have it, but it's not who you are, it's a part of you. So when you can change that, you can change everything around you. So I think that some of it, the power comes from, number one, being kind to yourself. You know, really be kind to yourself. It doesn't make you any different to anybody else. It just means that you have different challenges in life. The power of your inner voice is so important as well. Whatever you're telling yourself on the inside, you're going to see the results of on the outside. So just be kinder to yourself. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's no shame for having any of these, whether it's a physical disability like mine, whether it's mind health, or whether it's diabetes, or whether it's MS or fibromyalgia, or any of these things. There's no shame in it. It's just part of your human makeup at the time. So I would say celebrate it and appreciate it and educate others. I do like to talk about, the different aspects of the disability for me. So if I have small children, normally this is the one that gets me because I walk with a walking stick. So when I'm going into a supermarket, a parent might be coming out with a child, and the child will be pointing and staring and going, Mum, why has that lady got a stick? And the parents always go, oh no, stop that, don't point, don't stare, it's rude. And I always say it's not rude, let them ask a question. Because it's that mentality, it's that old mentality of don't ask the questions, let's push it under the carpet, let's ignore it, That's what's got us into the place of having stigma, and then people developing limiting self-beliefs around themselves. So for all of us, if we want to move forwards in any way, shape or form, we have to start on the inside and just be the change. You've heard this, be the change you want to see. You are the change. Educate others. Let's take away the stigma from all types of different ability, because there is no different ability. We are just all the same, and we are all one.